Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Conversations from the Diaspora. This is our second episode, and I'd like to welcome a very special guest today, Khulud. I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction. Khulud is a woman of many talents. By profession, she's a fashion designer and merchandiser. She started her first ever fashion design and studio in Amman, Jordan, then managed a few international brands. Currently, Khulud is a certified law and attraction practitioner and kids yoga teacher. She's a relationship spiritual life coach and EFT practitioner and is delving deeper into this field where she is in the process of becoming a certified menopause specialist and coach. So she is very much in this healing arena. Over the past year, Khulud has been working with individuals in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as Palestinians in the diaspora affected by the genocide, offering them coaching, meditation, EFT sessions, both in Arabic and in English. So, such a treat to have you here, Khulud. Thank you so much for making the time. Yeah, I'd love to
It's my
dive right in.
pleasure, Layla. You're a very precious and dear person to myself, and it's such a privilege and a pleasure and an honor to be having this conversation with you. And I hope this reaches many people and many people can relate to it and learn from it.
I hope so too, and it's really why we're doing this. It's so that we can amplify those Palestinian voices, not only the ones that are on the ground, but also us in the diaspora who, we've had to live in so many different ways, and so we'd love to show that to the world. So Khulud, why don't we get started? Give us a little bit about your background, and also it would be very helpful if you started by letting us know which subtype or category of Palestinian that you are. And for those of you who are joining in for the first time, in my previous episode, my previous guest, Naham, explicitly describes the subtypes and categories of Palestinians, which is really important to understand how we move around in the world. And there's also a shorter video on the YouTube channel that is about 5 minutes long that describes all the subtypes of the Palestinians by Naham. So, Khulud, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm grateful for Nagam for simplifying that and making that very clear for everyone who doesn't understand what all of us Palestinians went through or how we live, to explain all the different types and subtypes. Now, at the core, we are all just simply Palestinians. We are all people of the land. And even though the majority of us were taken out of the land lives in us.
Mm-hmm.
Palestine
Mm-hmm.
always throws us back. I never lived there. I only had the privilege of visiting one time only in 1999 for just a couple of weeks. But that felt like going back home. So what
Mm-hmm.
type am I? I'm a Palestinian who lives in the diaspora. It was very difficult for me to pinpoint what I am, because I am not of a refugee status, because I never had a refugee status per se, but I never was a citizen of any other country.
So
I
could
carry
you could you could you elaborate more on what that means?
I carried I grew up in a very political home. My father was a politician. He's a retired he's a writer right now, so he's retired from politics in the political sphere, but he still writes about politics and his opinions. But he's no longer of a politician status.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up in a political home. as a Palestinian. So my sisters and myself, we carried the passport of whatever passport my father was offered at that time, whatever the group of Palestinians were offered by their allies at that time. So I was born a Yemeni because we had a Yemeni passport. Then over the years, I had an Algerian passport for some time, an Iraqi passport for some time, a Jordanian passport for some time. All of those were temporary passports. They were
Hmm.
travel documents. So
Hmm.
they're not the refugee travel documents as other refugees of, say, Syria or Lebanon carry.
Hmm.
But they were official passports issued by the governments, but they don't have the serial number that the citizens usually have, or they're temporary. They're either for 1 year when we're privileged, they could be for 2 years. Sometimes they're renewed, sometimes they're not. It all depends on the relationship with that country at that time, with
Hmm.
the Palestinian organization. So I would describe myself as something that I talked to you about before. This puts me in a category of its own. I want to say I'm a privileged refugee because I was never a citizen of any country, but I still did not belong anywhere.
Hmm.
But I still had the privilege of having the liberty of living in many good countries with dignity, without uh,
Hmm.
any problems, and was able to travel, get visas, and travel to Europe, the United States, other Arab countries with these passports that I carried with no problems. So a privileged refugee, if I may say. Now, I just want to point that after I got married, I did receive a citizenship from the country that my husband
Hmm.
carries the passport of.
Hmm.
So I'm officially a citizen of a country. Very grateful for that, but Palestinian to the core.
Hmm. And what was that like? It sounds like you've had to move around quite a bit. You've mentioned several countries. So what was that like?
I didn't live in many of these countries. I carried the Yemeni passport, never visited Yemen. I
Oh,
carried the Iraqi passport. I visited once, but never lived there. Visited Algeria, never lived there. It was just the relationship between the Palestinian organization, the PLO, and these countries and
okay.
governments at that
And then
time.
and
But
through your father's role
it
in
was
that.
just through
Hmm.
my father's role, his position as a high level politician in the PLO at that time. So we were offered whatever passports we were given. Now that it was a privilege, but that did cause some problems because we would start at a school with a certain passport and then we want to register for the next year and we don't have that passport anymore. So it did cause some problems that we weren't aware of as children. But I'm
Hmm.
sure my mother had to struggle to explain to them we are still the same people,
Hmm.
we are still the same children, attending the same school, but with different passports. Or it wasn't even nationality, it was just a passport. So it was
Hmm.
a struggle. I did grow up in several countries. I was born in Jordan, moved to Egypt and Libya for a little while before we settled in Lebanon, where we lived for 12 years, and then back to Egypt for 1 year, and then Jordan, where I finished my high school education and
Hmm.
lived there, minus the years of university years abroad until I got married, and then moved to another Arab country with my husband.
Hmm. And so those memories of growing up in Lebanon, that's a long time, they're vivid for you. You spent a lot of time there. What was that like?
Many of the memories are vivid now, but for a long time, I want to say for decades, many of my memories were erased. I thought I was crazy. I thought nothing was significant enough for me to remember. But being in the spiritual realm
Mhm.
and going through all the work that I went through, I realized it was just a trauma reaction and a healing mechanism for myself to erase many of the memories. So growing up in Lebanon, I have wonderful memories of a beautiful country with beautiful people and my school, my friends. It was all so wonderful. But we did go through two major wars. The first one was the Lebanese Civil War. I didn't have many memories of that, but then when the Gaza war started and the water problem arose, and I saw little kids carrying the buckets of water or big bottles going to the trucks or going to the water source to carry them to their tents. That hit me so hard, and I had to do so much work until the memory of myself doing something very similar. I don't want to compare myself to the problems people in Gaza and our people are going through. It cannot be compared. But I did go through a war where, as a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, I had to go down to the main water pump and down the road, cross the street, carry 2 gallons, like the big, I don't know how many gallons it is, like the big buckets
Mhm.
of empty buckets, and go to these water taps and carry them and come back and walk the 5 floors up to our apartment because my mom had just given birth at that time. My dad was always out at work or hiding someplace because of the dangers. So this brought back that memory in my body and in my nervous system. And I couldn't understand why I was sobbing so much and why I was so angry at that time until I did the work a few weeks later. And then I understood how that related to me. It took me back to my 5-year-old self. So these traumas of us living through wars, my God, I can't but imagine what our people are going to have to deal with many years from now when
Mm.
everything is all peaceful and settled. But then another vivid memory is the invasion of Israel to Lebanon and then the occupation.
How
And
old were you? How old were you at that time?
I was 12. I was 12 in 1982. And
So like our daughters now.
yes,
Mm.
yes. And the Palestinians, most of them had to be deported. Many of them had to escape. Some of them fled. Some of them were allowed to stay. Majority had to
Why
flee
did they have to be deported?
because that was that's what Israel asked. It will continue to bomb Lebanon,
Right.
not unless all Palestinians leave.
Okay.
Palestinians
Sorry,
mainly
could you just remind us of the year just so that that's very clear?
1982. The invasion
Mhm.
started in June 1982. And in July, I want to say maybe end of July, that's when, after my father had left, my mother, myself, and my 2 younger siblings, we fled. We escaped, I remember, in a big taxi car, and we had 6 suitcases or 7 suitcases. So, we escaped with suitcases in the trunk of the car, suitcases in front of our legs in the car, and some even put on the roof of the car with ropes. And it took us maybe 13 or 14 hours to reach Jordan. We escaped to Jordan at that time. We had to go through Syria through all the borders of Lebanon, through Syria into Jordan, which is usually a much shorter drive, but it took us a good chunk of that day. And we had to escape late at night to evade many of the checkpoints or the dangerous zones, let's say. And then we lived 1 year in Egypt, and then my mom decided to go back to where her family was living in Jordan. So we moved back to Jordan when I was 14. It was a very dangerous time at that time. I remember all the bombings. The building right next door to us was hit by a missile. Many of my father's friends and family acquaintances were killed by that war. It was a traumatic time. And
yeah, could you, if it's okay, would you be okay to share a little bit of how that was? And the reason I ask is because I know we always look at Palestinians and we're like, they're so resilient. They're so resilient. And which they are. But we don't often talk about the actual trauma itself. So would you be okay maybe describing what that was like, at that age, having to constantly pick up, leave, adapt in a new place, start a new school, make new friends from a child's perspective?
honestly, we first of all, at that age, up until recently, we didn't know what trauma was. We didn't label it, didn't have a label. So it was just the feelings and the emotions that we went through. I want to say it was anger and shyness. I grew up as a very, very shy girl. I was embarrassed to say my opinion or express my opinion because I had, like you said, I had to start over so many times. Until I graduated from school, I had gone to, I can't remember now, 5 or 6 different schools in 3 different countries. So we had to make friends so many times. You start, you make friends, you settle in, and then you have to move again, but it's not by choice. And this is the frustrating thing. It's not by choice. Force have to move from one place to another for different reasons, for mainly war, primarily Israel. So the effects of that is I didn't think about it much at that time. Looking back, I think I was very scared most of the time. Like you said, very resilient and never argued, never, everybody, all the Palestinians who were in the same position, you just pick up and you move on and you do what you need to do, be it young, old, mothers, fathers, children, anybody. We just pick up and we carry on because we're resilient, we're tough. But looking back, I was scared. I was scared to make new friends. I was scared to get too comfortable in case we move. I was scared of another war breaking out and being hurt. I was scared for my dad's safety. I was one specific trauma did not affect me. It affected my sister physically. My sister, when we fled from Lebanon, was just about maybe 2.5 years old. And for months and months after that, she would close her ears and shut her eyes, sometimes scream, whenever an airplane or big truck passed by our car or some loud noise happened, because we lived through the war. And her little brain, poor thing, could not process that. So for months after that, even when we lived in Jordan, she couldn't, like little kids would look up and say, oh, airplane or tayyara in Arabic. And she would be like, blame, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So these are traumas that we had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And but you learn to live with it, and it manifests in itself many years later in the way you deal with relationships, in the way you deal with your own children, or in the way you handle life. So for us at that time, we just carried on, and it was business as usual, life as usual. You just had to live life as you were dealt it. But the biggest thing I want to say was I was scared, embarrassed, and a very shy girl that found it very difficult to make. It took me a while to trust my friends, but then once I have friends, I just wanted to hold on to them, and I still hold on to them very dearly, to my heart, because I never want to lose them, because we lost so many along the way. So whatever friendships we make, we just want to hold on to them, even if distance and time and everything separates us.
Mm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mm.
Very, very difficult, yet I feel our life was so rich because of that. For a while, some of my friends who actually were my friends in Lebanon, and together we didn't leave together, but I mean, at the same time, we all fled Lebanon, and people went to different places. But the ones who ended up in Jordan, and we reconnected in Jordan a year or later, a year or more later,
Mm-hmm.
we all had this connection. And I remember speaking to a friend of mine, and we both agreed that we have this little thing that nobody will understand. Nobody will understand what our life was in Lebanon, what it was like living there, what it was like surviving these wars, what it was like having to escape. So
And there's a little different, I mean, Lebanese were going through it as well, but
yes,
there's another nuance when you're also a Palestinian in
yes,
Lebanon under those
yes.
conditions, right?
Oh, for sure, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. The Lebanese had it hard. Their infrastructure was hit, their economy was hit, their people were being killed. Um, I'm not comparing, but for us as Palestinians, the Palestinians who fled from this war in particular, this invasion in 1982, and fled, let's say, to Jordan or to other places, experienced something different than the Palestinians who were already settled and maybe born in Jordan, for example.
Mm.
We experienced different things. We weren't the same type of Palestinians even. I don't know. I really don't know how to explain that, but we didn't have so much in common except our Palestinianism and our love for Palestine and our connection to our ancestors and to our land. But otherwise, we felt like our experiences were a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like living amongst Lebanese people?
From my memory, it was amazing. We had so many Lebanese friends, and my dad being a politician, of course, there were many later on, at an older age, when they explained there were many problems with the Lebanese government as politicians, but we had so many wonderful Lebanese friends. We have Lebanese family, half my father's family, or a big chunk of my father's family um, who were went as refugees in 1948 to Lebanon. So he has a big part of his family that is
Mm.
Lebanese, lives in Lebanon, like many Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we're all the same. Lebanese, Palestinians, Syrians, Jordanians, we're all the same. We're
Hmm.
all
The
one
Levant. We're all from the
area. The
Levant.
Levant was one
Hmm.
big area, and it's the West that built these borders, but we're all the same.
Hmm.
We have the same
Hmm.
language, we have the same food, we have the same, I want to say the same mentality and the same way of thinking,
Values. Yeah,
and the same
values.
values and the
Hmm.
same family connections. So it didn't feel any different living in Lebanon or living in Jordan or anywhere. It's just the same. It's just the
Hmm.
same. We took our Palestine with us everywhere, and we made friends and more family everywhere we went.
Mm. And this is, I want to weave now into my next question or curiosity, be just because we're talking about the Levant region, also the time that I'm interviewing right now, it's for me quite poignant because we're shifting towards the holiday season, towards Christmas, and you are an Arab and a Palestinian Christian. And I want to talk a little bit about that because not many people, I think, make the connection that Christianity, in fact, began in Judea. And, the Levant, that's the Levant region. So, just like we mentioned, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. I'm curious what it's like to be an Arab Palestinian Christian, what it was like before the start of the genocide, what it's been like since the genocide.
Okay. So I'm a very proud Palestinian, very proud Arab, very proud to be Christian. Um, it's it's a privilege to be a Christian from the land of Christ. This is where Jesus Christ came from. He was born a Jew to a Jew mother, and he came to spread the word of God, and he came to enlighten the people who didn't see the light, and he came with a wonderful, beautiful message of love and peace from our Creator. He was not only a messenger, he was the son of our Creator coming onto this earth to spread his message. And he started doing that from the land that I called home. And
Mm,
what a privilege is that? And it blows my mind that the West does not see how connected us Palestinians are to Jesus Christ, to Christianity, to the birthplace, to where it all started. So,
and I think people
I'm,
forget
people,
they don't know, or they forget that there are Arab
did
Christians.
they forget or were they manipulated, Layla? I think they were manipulated because they westernized Jesus Christ. You look at all the
Right.
pictures in many of the churches, and he's beautiful because whatever he is beautiful. He's a spiritual being. He's a beam of light. So of course he's beautiful, but he wasn't this blonde with blue eyes. He came from our region, from the Levant. So clearly he would be quote unquote brown, um, possibly darker hair, most probably darker eyes, because he was born to people from this area, from this region. So they westernized even the Bible. They westernized the
Mhm.
Christianity. Um, I'm a Catholic, and we follow the Vatican and the Pope and all that. But it didn't start there. It's an extension to where it actually originated. So all the time we felt like we had to prove our Christianity, to explain it to others. I remember one time my son was much younger, and parents were invited, each one at a different day, to come speak about your birthplace. Where does your parent come from? And oh my God, like that was an opportunity for me. I put on like a whole slideshow of places they could visit. I took with me a big tray of things from Palestine, like the Nabulsi cheese, the Nabulsi soaps, pieces of artifacts from Palestine, za'atar, oil, so many things on that. And one of the slides was the birthplace of Jesus. And I started talking about the birthplace of Jesus and us being Christian Palestinians and all that. And the teacher comes up to me much after the class and she's like, this is the first time I find out that Jesus was born in Palestine. Like, where did you think he was born? In the Vatican?
Your children go to a British school, so she was, I'm assuming, a British teacher.
She was an English, she was a British teacher. Did not know because they westernized everything. But I want to, before we move on to that, I just want to say that was my experience before the genocide. Like we always had to say, I'm a Christian Arab. And that was such a privilege to always say. But then after the genocide, it became a need to say it because it is a war against all Palestinians alike, but it's not a war against Islam, and it's not a war against Muslim Arabs. Let's not forget that the first Christian they ever wanted to kill and succeeded at that was Jesus Christ himself. In the same land, the wars are happening. So Christians and Christianity has been attacked for many, many, many centuries by Israel, it started off, it developed to becoming Israel. I mean, Israel did not even exist until 1948.
Yes. You're right.
But by so many, I don't know how to label them.
Invaders.
But by invaders. But yeah. Israel has had its war against Christianity. And you see it on TV, you see it in social media now. Christians are walking down the streets, nuns, priests, they get spat on and cussed and cursed by the ultra Jews or by the extremists. And it's not a war against Islam. It's not a the Muslims should not be the only ones having to fight this fight. We are always calling on our Muslim brothers and sisters to come save Palestine, which is, in my opinion, should be a duty because of its importance in Islam. Ard al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, as we say. But where are Christian brothers and sisters in the Western world and everywhere around? This is the birthplace of the person you're following. This is the birthplace of your actual religion, what you're teaching your children and your grandchildren, what your ancestors followed. They should be fighting this fight with us and for us. But we're here fighting this fight alone because they manipulate everything. They manipulate history and even manipulate religion, sadly. So us as Christians are marginalized, as Palestinian Christians are marginalized because we are a minority. That is the truth. Everyone in that area centuries ago, we were all just Jews, not unless we were atheists. And then many of those became Christians after Jesus Christ was baptized. Everyone wanted to get baptized, or many of them got baptized and became Christians. And then after Prophet Muhammad came onto this earth, many of those followed his religion and became Muslims. So we all come from the same thing. We were all born to the same people, but we all came from this same area. So how they want to manipulate this history and this rich religious history is just beyond me.
And how has I know Christmas and Easter were always big for you in your household and celebrating and getting together with your family. I'm sure that's changed a lot since last year. So how has that impacted you
I tell you a
and your
very
family?
it sounds funny now, so I want to call it a funny story. Last year, I didn't want to put up any Christmas decoration because it did not feel right. I still don't have now. But then my husband and my children said at least it's a Christmas tree. So I agreed. Will have a Christmas tree, but I don't want to decorate the whole house. It just did not feel right. The war had just, it was still all so fresh. Not that we're over it now, but it was too much to handle at that time. So, but I didn't feel like it. And actually, the whole atmosphere in the house, there was so much sadness. So we put natural trees. The tree arrived on a Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the nanny asked me, you don't want to decorate the tree? The tree was just sitting there in the middle of my living room, not decorated. And I said, I don't feel like it. And she asked permission to decorate it herself. So I said, no, don't decorate, just put the lights on it because I didn't feel like it. And then Thursday night, I decided, you know what, let me just decorate it. But I wasn't feeling it, honestly, Layla. It was heartbreaking. I was decorating with tears rather than the
Mm.
usual Christmas hymns and songs. And we usually blast it on. Um, we have Christmas songs and we take pictures and videos of all of us decorating the tree. I did it after everyone had slept. I stayed up late, putting some of the decorations on, and I didn't feel like it. The next morning, I wake up, and the first thing I do is I come and I'm standing there looking at the tree, and the tree just went, it fell. And all the decorations, all the beautiful decorations on them, they splattered everywhere. There was broken glass everywhere. And because it's a natural tree, it sits in water, so there was water all over on the furniture, on the carpets, on the floor. It's because I did it without, in Arabic we say balanifs, without feeling it. I didn't feel
Mm.
it. I didn't want to do it anyway. We put it back up with a few decorations that survived the fall. I want to put a tree this year again because it represents our Christianity. War or no war, we are still Christians, and our Christianity does not disappear because of the war. It's not a war. I'm sorry. I don't want to call it a war. And
Mm.
in this
I I
Christianity,
uh I I agree with that. It's not a
yeah.
war. No.
But because
No.
of everything that's happening to our
Hmm.
people, there is no enthusiasm about anything, but I still will put a tree this
Hmm.
year because we shouldn't forget who we are. And part of who we are, our identity is Christ. We're Christian. We're Christian Arab Palestinians. So I will represent Christianity this Christmas with a tree, with some decorations on the tree. But it's not the same, Layla. It's not the same. We can't fully be happy or in a celebratory mode or mood when we see all this
Mm.
destruction and all
Yeah.
these killings and all this
There's so much grief. There's so
too
much
heavy,
grief. Hmm.
too much grief, so much. And in your introduction, you introduced me as working with some people there. And I say it's a different level of connection to what's happening when you actually speak to people in there.
Hmm. Would
When
you be
you,
allowed to, I mean, obviously you can't share personal stories, but would you be allowed to give us some insight into what it's like? Because again, I think people miss the layers and layers of it all because all we're seeing is the carnage, the destruction, the forced starvation, the horror. Um, the rubble,
Yeah.
but you are actually making connection with people in current time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'll share only one little thing because I don't know how much I can share of their traumas and their stories. As you said, they're very personal, but
No,
I'll
I'm
share
not asking you
only
to share
one
the traumas,
story.
just the essence of what it's like.
It's very, very difficult, but my God, they have so much dignity. They have so much self-respect. They have so much faith in Islam, in God. And it's just so admirable. Like they humble me every time I speak to anyone in there. But one story I want to share with you is where I was personally humbled. Um, a doctor approached me. She's a psychiatrist herself, and she was working on her PhD. No, she was working on something, like she already has her PhD and she's working on something else. And every time we contacted each other, she would call me Dr. Khulud. And I told her, I'm not a doctor. I'm nothing. I'm just a tiny little coach. But she said it doesn't matter. It's what you're helping us with, because she asked for hands-on help because she at that time, after being displaced herself and going through everything that they were going through, she was helping children and moms in her areas. So they would have a common tent, let's say, where they gather the moms with the children, or children separately and the moms separately, and they give them hands-on help to deal with their own ongoing traumas. Because they're going through whatever they're going through, but they've already experienced layers and layers and layers of traumas, because some of them might have lost family members, some of them, all of them, lost homes, or the children lost friends and their schools and their routines and life. So she asked for EFT sessions to teach her how she can do it, how she can apply that and teach it to the children and to the moms. And then her coming back and thanking me. And as I said, she would always call me doctor. And I said, no. And she said, but the work that you taught me to teach them, and how I'm talking to them and how they're applying it to themselves, they're able to sleep, not a full night because of everything that's happening, of all the bombings, but at least when they do sleep, they're sleeping a bit sounder. As they're going through their days, they're not always on edge, because they've learned how to calm their nervous system through. I did not create EFT. I learned it, and I apply it. I do sessions with people, but it's that simple thing that we can teach them and create a model in Arabic for them that they can apply to these children and these moms, to try to, just for a little bit, help them, just for that little fraction of that humongous, heart-shattering thing that they're going through, is humbling to me, honestly. And so talking to them, they humble you. They humble you, Layla. And the traumas are beyond what any brain can imagine. I worked with one woman who told me at some point, when she would walk down the streets and see dead bodies, she started to laugh. After months of complete death and destruction around her, she got to a point where she couldn't control her laughing, because that was her trauma. She couldn't handle. She couldn't handle it. So it's beyond what any brain can ever imagine. The pictures and the videos that we see show you one part of one incident on that one day. There are plenty of incidents on daily basis everywhere.
How do you self-regulate when you hear stories like that? And that how do you create that boundary for yourself so that you can keep doing the healing work?
For a while, I didn't want to create that boundary. I don't know if that makes any sense. I didn't want
Hmm.
to be separated from them.
Completely,
I didn't
completely.
want to feel healed. I wanted
Hmm.
to feel their pain because I felt too privileged not to. So, and for a while, I didn't know how to sit in meditation anymore because I felt like my Western teachers and everyone who taught me was manipulating us. And for a big part, they were whitewashing our brains. And I'm sorry. And they did want to separate us from the whole think internally, think of yourself, heal yourself, without teaching us how to heal as a people, as a community. So because I felt so much anger for them, I didn't want to regulate. And that manifested itself in my household with so many anger bursts. And it affected my relationship with my own family and my children. I was just an angry person walking because anything that could happen could trigger me. So I regulate now by sitting in silence, and I don't disconnect. I don't believe in having to not watch so you can disconnect. No, you need to watch so it registers so we don't forget. Um, if I want to be with friends and not watch what's happening for half a day or anything, that's okay. I don't feel guilty anymore.
Hmm.
There is no guilt if I disconnect a little bit physically, but I'm not mentally and emotionally disconnecting
Hmm.
from them. So it's sitting in silence, sometimes writing, sometimes meditation, prayer. And for the people here where I'm living or online, I was holding prayer circles and meditation
Hmm.
circles
Hmm.
because they also had families there. They also didn't know how to regulate themselves. So doing that for others actually helps me regulate myself
Hmm.
more than having to heal myself, because I don't think, or I didn't for a long time think I deserved to heal my own pain because they're suffering. No, no, they were a priority. So I wanted to
Hmm.
help them. And that
Hmm.
helped me, honestly.
Hmm. It's lovely to hear you share your experience. Thank you for doing it so openly because, I'm also a practitioner and a meditator, and I really struggled the first 4 or 5 months when the genocide started. I really struggled to sit and, um, yeah, it was almost like everything was a facade, and there was also a lot of anger in me as well. Um, because I felt, wow, this is, when we practice for life. We practice for anything that comes our way. And then I just felt like many humanitarian issues have been brought up in these spiritual circles,
Yeah.
but for some reason, nobody could mention the word Palestine, or everything had to be starting with Israel or Hamas. So it was such a deflection on the 76, or I even call it 100-year struggle of the
Yeah.
Palestinian people.
Has been
um,
100
and
plus
and
years.
yeah, and still today, it still comes back to that October 7th. And this is not a political channel, so we're not going to get into that. We're not going to get into all the evidence that has come out, over the last year, what's been exposed, what the truth is. We can leave that for people to go and educate themselves on that on their own. However, um, I want to just share that it's very similar to what you're saying. The faith, that we have seen has come out, the faith, as you call it, humbling, that's brought me back into my practice, my own practice, which are the wisdom teachings, and it's even more potent right now,
Yeah,
because I'm realizing I'm not actually mad at the teachings. I'm it's
exactly.
not the
Thank you for
teachings,
saying
it's
that.
not the teachings that are the problem, but I was mad at everything. But what I just want to say is that it's not the teachings that are at fault. It's like when you look at anyone that's dogmatic or extreme, it's not the actual essence of the faith.
Absolutely.
Whether it's Judaism or Islam or Christianity or Buddhism,
Absolutely.
it's how it's being put out there. But there is a huge problem in our commercial world where people are offering this and not bringing in the reality.
You're right. You're right. Yeah. Just like you said, I was angry at everything, at the teachings, at the teachers, and everyone. Now, I did not reconnect with my teachers because I'm disappointed in them. But I did go back to some of the things, some of the teachings, like you said, the wisdom, the the ancestral wisdoms in
Mm-hmm.
some of these ancient teachings.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to those. Those are the core things that
Mm-hmm.
I will go by. And I want to say, yeah, I'm a bigger believer now. I was always uh, faithful to my religion and to my creator and to God and all that, but more so now because
Mm-hmm.
of everything. Because when you see how with everything they're going through, they say Alhamdulillah,
Mm-hmm.
or Shaheed la Allah, or for our land, or you can't but say, I wanna believe in their God as well. And it's
Yeah.
our God. It's our God. So
And
it's
it's
brought me
it's
back to
it,
my faith
yeah,
even more.
yeah. I think that word faith is really, really,
Yeah.
I say it again, poignant and really potent. And isn't that faith when you turn to it, especially when it's hard?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Rather than turn away from it when things get
Yeah, and
hard.
and and place blame
This is
and
this is
victimize and do
this is
anything
when
like
you're
that.
tested. This is when
Mm,
you're tested the most.
yeah, and that's why they're saying that Gaza has been and Palestine is the litmus test of humanity right now. So
Absolutely.
I just
100%.
yeah, I really want to
100%.
thank you so much for sharing that. Um, I'm conscious of time. I am going to ask this with every guest. This is always my final question because it's, I think, so different for everybody. And
Yeah.
I'm so curious to see everybody's views on how they see a liberated Palestine. So, Khulud, what does a liberated Palestine look like for you? Is that even something that you can think of with everything that's gone on over the last year?
Oh, absolutely. That's part of our faith also. If we didn't believe that Palestine will be liberated and free, then what's the point of everything that's been happening and everything that has happened for the past so many decades and everything that is happening now if we did not believe in a liberated Palestine? Hopefully sooner than later. We don't want to wait another
Mm,
year or decade or century for this to happen. But yeah, of course, I believe in a liberated Palestine. It's the freedom of choice. It's the freedom to be able to just be there, go there, carry its passport and proudly everywhere. But to go in a deeper depth, I want to say a liberated Palestine. For me, it embodies the vision of peace, of excuse me, of dignity, of a cultural resurgence, let's say. And when I envision that, I look at a place where the Palestinians are all connected together like they used to be, of all faiths. It's a place where you all live peacefully and harmoniously together, where education and culture and arts and commerce are practiced and done by everyone for everyone, just like any other place on the face of this earth. In my vision, I'm just trying to gather my words to think of.
You're doing a beautiful job, by the way.
I would think of healthcare and the economic opportunities for all, for everyone living on the land of Palestine, whoever they are, whatever religion they are, equal rights for everyone. I want the reconnection with, or in my vision of this liberation, it's the reconnection with family and friends there alike. As I mentioned before, my father is from a city that is under the Israeli dominance. So his family have the Israeli passport. They identify as Palestinians through and through, but they travel with their Israeli documentations. And my mother comes from Jerusalem and Ramallah, but they both cannot, people in Ramallah and Jerusalem cannot go visit these people living in the other part of our bigger Palestine. So that physical, metaphorical, and spiritual walls to be broken down, and we all integrate together. Yeah. That's how I see it.
It's beautifully said. It wasn't until I visited Palestine that I understood that people within Palestine could not see each other.
Yeah.
Because of the way the country was divided. So that was really beautifully said. And I'm going to add, I'm just going to add to that because I echo everything that you say. And I'm just going to add, and for us, particularly people like me from the 1948 group, the ability to return and be on that land as well.
Yes.
For us in the diaspora.
Palestine will be the place where justice and equality prevail, where the truth prevails, and it will set an example. And I think this is what keeps us all going, knowing in our hearts, in our cores, that our truth and our justice will eventually prevail.
And you were going to add something about Nagham.
Yes, I wanted to say Nagham's explained all that so perfectly well. I forgot what the point was.
It was it was the different types and subtypes of Palestinians, I believe, and which explains the movement of Palestinians, whether you're in the occupied territories, in Jerusalem, in between Jerusalem and the occupied territories, or in the diaspora.
Exactly. Yeah.
Khulud, thank you so much.
Thank you for having this conversation with me, for allowing me to give you a little bit of history about me. But I'm one of millions of stories and we all have our different experiences
Mhm.
and our different backgrounds, but we're all one. We're all
And
Palestine.
I think your beautiful dress represents that so beautifully. It's like many different threads.
Beautiful.
It's
Yeah,
beautiful. Yeah, many
thank you.
different
Thank
threads,
you.
but we're all the same at the
We're
core. So
all one. We're all one.
yeah.
We're all connected with
Mm.
our love for, is it just the land or our love for freedom and equality?
I think
So
for all of that, for
all of it,
humanity and
for
humanity.
humanity. And
Yeah.
until Palestine is liberated and free, none of us are free. And humanity will never be the same until we see that day
Mhm.
of justice.
Mhm.
Thank you,
Thank
Leila.
thank you, Khulud. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
It was my absolute pleasure. So, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. So, I really thank you and for your openness. I know we actually met in Beirut just when you were sharing the story of growing up there and your history there. I just thought, oh, how perfect that's Beirut is the city
It
that
was
you and I
full
met in.
circle,
Yeah,
full circle.
yeah.
Everything happens as it's supposed to happen.
Mhm.
And it was no coincidence for me to meet you there and building that
Mm.
sisterhood with
Yeah.
you. I don't want to call
Mhm.
it a friendship because you're not just a friend, and you know
Mm.
that.
Yeah. And I feel the same. So, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too. You